What's up, cats? It's Sam Guck with Sax, and today we're going to be analyzing how Debussy played an impact on the jazz modal music scene in the 50s and 60s. So we're talking McCoy Tyner, Joe Henderson, Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock, John Coltrane, and we're going to be doing this specifically by looking at Debussy's Girl with the Flaxen Hair and comparing its modal analysis use to Coltrane's Giant Steps and, in a larger sense, the Coltrane Matrix, because the way Debussy and Coltrane are understanding the relationship between modes are very similar here. Now, Kennesaw State University's Undergraduate Research Journal in 2017 released a great article that kind of loosely explains some of the similarities between Debussy and Coltrane, but we're going to dig way deeper into it right now. Coltrane did study at the Granoff School of Music in Philadelphia, which had Debussy as a major part of its instruction, and he did study a lot of Debussy. He was also known in introductions to solos to play references to Debussy's compositions, and this is actually a really popular jazz technique called signifying. Not only that, but we do have a lot of recordings of jazz musicians from across history using Debussy as sort of an etude study. Here's a recording of Johnny Smith playing Girl with the Flaxen Hair. So, first of all, in order to understand how this influenced modal jazz, we need to understand what makes this piece modal or post-tonal. No matter whatever you want to call it, it's the same thing. And let's figure that out by looking at that very first phrase. Let's listen to a recording by Jacques Rouvier to hear it in the original key. So not looking at that first chord. Our first almost 2 bars up until the and of 4, we have absolutely no harmony. It's perfectly monophonic. So we have no strong place to root ourselves. And although Debussy absolutely would have understood the European or American ear's major scale bias, so he would have understood that when we hear this, we're hearing so, mi, do. He chooses to create tension against that with his rhythmic placement. So you'll notice that E flat is on the beat 3 downbeat, and D flat's on the 1, but it carries over. So there's this tension of, are we trying to develop a G flat 6 sound, or are we trying to develop this E flat minor 7 sound? In the jazz community, we would probably call this arpeggiation of the ambichord or the ambiguous chord. And it's this ambiguous sound that leads us to understand that he's functioning in modes instead of a strict tonal center. Now, of course, the first kind of tonal center that we hear implied is G-flat Ionian mode, which to our ear would sound like G-flat major. So throughout the piece, we have 3 different modes happening: G-flat Ionian, C-flat Ionian, and E-flat Ionian. Sometimes E-flat Aeolian as a shifting point, because as we all know, G-flat Ionian and E-flat Aeolian are the exact same notes in the pitch collection. And you can see I've highlighted here all of the places in which the implied tonal center switches. And one thing to notice is that there's not a strict pattern. It doesn't happen C flat, E flat, G flat every time. He's mixing it up. We go from G flat to E flat to C flat to G flat to C flat. So we're switching back and forth, and what he's trying to show us is that these all flow together really smoothly. Before we dig into the actual understanding of why these work so smoothly together and how he made that possible, I do want to point out a couple little things that he does compositionally that I think are brilliant. First, I want to check out in measure 15, or in measure 14 leading into 15. At 15, we've got the return to the C flat sound. Right before, we've got this G flat pedal, and we're still hearing things in G flat. And we're not certain we're in C flat until that downbeat at measure 15. But 14 is setting it up really beautifully with this Lydian root motion that starts on a G flat. We have the G flat pedal going, and the G flat pedal actually continues even after we get into the C flat sound. But this Lydian root motion gives us a new mode to latch our ears onto and help smoothly lead us into C flat. So let's take a listen to this because I think it sounds absolutely gorgeous. Listen closely for the root. We get this beautiful new sound. And also in measure 15, this is the first place where we see the pitch collection in the melody expanding. We're suddenly getting F flats or E naturals, depending on how you want to think about it. Saxophonists, you have my heart. We're all suffering together trying to understand this many flats. Some other cool things to note in measure 12, we've got this chord, which could be just a super extended G major chord. It's got like 9s and 13s in it, but it really makes more sense to analyze it as stacked fourths. You got the G flat, D flat, C flat, E flat, A flat, and they're all stacked together in a way that Herbie Hancock does all of the time. So we're talking today about how this style of analysis leads to Coltrane's line of thinking, but Coltrane was not the only person using this. Herbie Hancock is an excellent example, especially with all of the stacked fourths and the 7 and 9 extension chords that are happening in bars 16 through 18. Now back to that G flat pedal I mentioned earlier. We see at the beginning of measure 12, G flat is the root of that stacked fourth chord. And then by measure 13, we are in more of a G flat tonal center sound. And then we switch into some ambiguity, and then we eventually get to B flat. But we're still honing in on that G flat pedal no matter what. This is something that Coltrane also uses, specifically in Naima. So let's listen to this one more time so you can hear it. Instead of focusing on the root motion, focus on the G flat pedal this time. And I'm going to very gently play a G flat on the piano here so you can hear it a little bit better. I know Spotify destroys the sound of everything. So it's still working here. Coltrane uses a lot of shifting modes over a pedal too. Let's check out the B section of his piece Naima. Once again, I'm going to very, very gently play B flat. The chords you're looking at here are the saxophone chords. So if you see an A flat, it's actually a C flat, and if you see a G, it's actually a B flat. But here it is. I want to keep listening, but we got to move on. Okay, so let's get into actually the meat and potatoes of this, which is how do these three modes relate to each other? Now, in like traditional European analysis or jazz analysis, we'd be looking at note names. And I've put the note names for you on the left, but frankly, nobody should ever have to read in C flat. So I've put it in terms of the pitch collections instead, using the number system. So as you can see, in green, we have C flat, in blue, we have E flat, and in orange, we have G flat. And to make this all kind of smooth and legible, I've just had them all start at 3, which is E flat, so that we can see exactly how they relate to each other. Now, he uses the triads of each of these to connect them smoothly throughout the piece. And as you can see by the highlights I've done here, every single note in each triad, except for one, relates to at least one other mode. So C flat and E flat and G flat all share pitch A, which is B flat. They also all share pitch 1, which is D flat, and they all share pitch 3, which is E flat. And then 6, B, and 3 are shared solely between C flat and E flat. And then poor little 7, poor G natural, gets left out in this situation. And we're going to dig more into why in just a second. But I want you for a second to imagine that you're John Coltrane. And you've figured out this way of analyzing the piece. That 7 is going to stick out to you. And when you listen to it in the music, that E flat Ionian sound is so jarring because of that G natural, or that 7. So what Coltrane did was, instead of combining the relationships between 3 modes that together form a major triad, so E flat, G, and C flat, he combined ones that are augmentally related. So he does. Brain is not braining. Oh my goodness. Let's see how that looks graphically. So as you can see in giant steps, instead of having this jarring one note that's left out, and then some pitches that relate to every single mode, we have, instead of our 3 triads, no pitch in any triad fits into all 3 pitch collections of the mode, but every single pitch of the triads fits into 2 different pitch collections of the mode. So pitch 2 fits into G and E flat, pitch 3 fits into E flat and B, so on and so forth. But you'll notice every single note that happens in a triad has 2 places, but not 3 within the mode. This is not to say that Debussy did anything wrong in choosing not to relate 3 augmentally related roots of modes. It's true, it's not a perfectly symmetrical way to relate the chords together, or the pitch collections together, as Coltrane did. This doesn't mean what Coltrane did is necessarily better, although, I mean, the Coltrane matrix, like, this is brilliant. And he certainly developed this, at least partially, out of the way Debussy was relating modes to each other. But let's talk about why didn't Debussy want to make it a symmetrical relationship between his modes the way Coltrane wanted to make it a symmetrical relationship between modes. To understand that, we kind of need to take a peek at the poem that The Girl with the Flaxen Hair was based off of. Sitting amidst the alfalfa and flower, who sings in the cool morning hour? It is the girl with the flaxen hair, the beauty with cherry lips so fair. And then later we have a few more lines that harp on these cherry lips. Your mouth has colors, oh so divine. Your rosy lips, which I so praise. Red partridges, crimson lips to steal. So if you don't know what the word flaxen means, it means a pale yellow. And alfalfa flowers can be yellow or purple. I would argue that Girl with the Flaxen Hair is talking about yellow alfalfa, because the girl with the flaxen hair, if she has a pale complexion and pale hair, and she's sitting in a field of yellow flowers, but she has cherry red lips, those are going to stick out. They're going to be beautifully jarring. The same way that G natural within these 3 triads is so jarring. So this is absolutely an intentional lack of symmetry on Debussy's part. They also had some similar fashion sense, but that's not here nor there. Basically, the entire point of this discussion is to understand that if you're studying modal music and you're looking for ways to improvise, Debussy is a great place to start. And as the phrase goes, if you want to be someone's student, you study them. If you want to be their peer, you study who they studied. So if you want to be Coltrane's peer, as much as that's absolutely not a possible thing to do, you should study Debussy.